Right now, with the season, with almost every team about 25 games or more played, we're also 57 days away from the trade deadline. This is where you start to see the teams that could possibly decide to either blow it up or they could decide to go fully in on the roster and improve that roster by making some trades. So today's episode, we're going to talk about what teams could be buyers and or sellers at the NBA trade deadline. We're going to get into all that plus some more right after this.
The number one place for your daily basketball fix, NBA Central, hosted by the one and only CEO Haize.
All right, welcome to another episode of NBA Central. I'm the host here, Haize, one of the hosts here. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about teams that could be buyers or sellers by the NBA trade deadline. And the first team that I want to talk about is the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat right now sit at 13-15 on the season, 2 games under 500. And that roster it kind of seems like they just haven't gotten it together. And yes, they lost some minor pieces of what we thought were minor pieces, but this Miami Heat team, while they may not look to make that decision for sure by this trade deadline, I do want to put them on the list because I think that they could be either buyers or sellers just depending on what way they determine that they want to go. Do they want to try to re-up, right, and capitalize on having a player like Jimmy Butler, or do they decide to go full youth movement and try to rebuild that team so they have a team for years and years to come? And it could really go either way for the Miami Heat. Now, I do think the Miami Heat, if they do decide to try and move Jimmy Butler, would be one of the most unexpected moves of the NBA so far this season. But I do think that there is a possibility. Now, I do think that there's a higher chance that they would be buyers at the trade deadline, but there are definitely some that they could be a seller at the deadline, especially looking at Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler. If they decide to go full rebuild and just bet on youth and bet on guys like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and kind of rebuild through that, could be options for the Miami Heat. Now, let me know down below if you think the Miami Heat are more likely to go buyers or sellers at the trade deadline, but I definitely think that they are a candidate to try to make that move and go at it. Now, this next team that we talk about is a team that I came into this season expecting them to be sellers, but then with the way that they performed at the beginning of the season, I think a lot of people thought that they may either stand pat or they may try to improve this team in some ways and just go with this roster and become a playoff team. But that's the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz that started off the season being one of the top teams in the Western Conference here lately have come back down to earth. They are 4-6 in their last 10 and right now sit at 16-14 on the season, and they would currently be the 8th seed in the Western Conference if the playoffs were to start today. Now, you could make a conversation and an argument for them to be more sellers at the trade deadline, but I'm thinking that they're going to go back. More buyers, but I think they're going to go back to kind of my original thought coming into the season, and they're going to be big time sellers at the trade deadline. When you look at some of the parts of this roster that they could look to move, Michael Conley for sure, Jordan Crawford, hell, they even could look to trade Lauri Markkanen, who started off the season being really, really hot. And maybe you could convince a team that's maybe either on the precipice, another team that is kind of a middle of the pack team, to make a trade for Lauri Markkanen, and you can get some first round picks, and they can look at Lauri and think Lauri may, with his improved play, be kind of what pushes them further into that playoff run. It could really go either way for the Utah Jazz, but I'm fully expecting this team to be complete sellers at the trade deadline. When you just look at the number of contracts that they could move, some contracts, of course, with longer terms on them than not. But they definitely could look, and I do think, me personally, I would be betting on the Utah Jazz to more so be sellers at that trade deadline and to kind of go the way that a lot of NBA pundits thought they would be coming into the season, and that is maybe, and it may be out of the realm of possibility for them now to go into the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, but it definitely could be something. And you could look at like a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, right? Not a team that's necessarily doing horrible, but they are underperforming so far. Could they look to move Tobias Harris, capitalize on some of the first round picks that they have, and bring in a player like Lauri Markkanen and Mike Conley to kind of help even out that team? Again, not saying that that's per se the type of deal that they would look to do, but I do think that there is some options on the table that this team could do if they decide to go full sell by the trade deadline. So the Utah Jazz are definitely one that are on my radar with that one. And the next one that I do have to mention is my team. As you guys know, I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. I started off this journey with the Chicago Bulls Central being my main channel. And so the Chicago Bulls are an interesting team. And I'm not going to go too heavy into them because I do have a whole channel covering them, but I would be remiss if I did not put them on this list. The Chicago Bulls right now, with the unbalance that is on their roster, the fact that they have a negative point differential when their 3 biggest players in Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic are on the court together, and a roster that just kind of, it fits at times, but at other times it doesn't fit. You have an expiring contract of over $20 million in Nikola Vucevic. They could definitely be looking to move that contract, or if they decide to get completely fancy with it, they could look to move two out of this big three. I don't think Zach LaVine is going to be a candidate with that, and we also had rumors come out that Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan are quote-unquote untouchable. But this Chicago Bulls team that's kind of been reluctant to make the big-time deal, right? They were rumored for Rudy Gobert. They were rumored for Jeremy Grant. They've been rumored for Miles Turner for a while, too. Like, just it's more speculative than, like, rumors that there was some serious interest there. But still, the Chicago Bulls could look, especially if they continue to underperform, be under 500, which they're considerably under 500, to really just retool that roster and decide and pick a direction to build around, open up some more spots and some more opportunities for their younger players that have flashed some things, but haven't quite gotten to that superstar, that star level production that they've hoped from players like Patrick Williams, or even being a well-rounded two-way player in Ayo Dosunmu, who, you know, hasn't had a lot of opportunities to grow his offensive game. He's shown flashes of that. So moving some of those bigger pieces could open that door up for the Chicago Bulls. Again, I do think this front office is reluctant to trade their younger pieces, but they could look, Vucevic, some other things they could look to move to capitalize on that and see where they go. The next one up that I want to talk about in this team, I think, I don't know if I think that they could be buyers and sellers. If I had to lean one way, I think sellers, and that is the Sacramento Kings, right? You look at like a player like Harrison Barnes, if they decide to move on from him to kind of open up some things. There were some weird rumors at the beginning of the season about Sabonis. I think those are gone now with considering his play so far this season. But I do think that the Sacramento Kings as well could be a team that looks to be sellers at the trade down, not like go full rebuild again. This is their first season, like playing as good as they are right now. The Sacramento Kings would be the 7th seed in the Western Conference, go to that play-in tournament, and they could look to move a veteran piece like Harrison Barnes, maybe some other things on that roster to bring in some talent and up their chances in the playoffs and capitalize on one of the better seasons that the Sacramento Kings has had in a while, especially since DeMarcus Cousins was there. So that could be another one. And then one team that I also want to talk about is the Indiana Pacers. Now, this is a team that I think is going to be more selling than necessarily buying. But even with that, the pieces that they're selling, they're going to get some considerable things back. When you look at Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, these have been the two biggest pieces that have been rumored. There was some conversations about the Lakers and things that happened, but this definitely is a team right now, as good as this team is playing, right? They are one of the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference right now, sitting at the 8th seed. It could go either way for them. They could look to bring back some considerable things to up that playoff status, or they could look to move the players in Buddy Hield and Miles Turner that I mentioned, get maybe picks back other than players that can contribute right now that may hurt them in their playoff run this season, but it could help them in their future overall. So that's definitely another team that I had on this list. And now we're going to get into the teams that I think coming into the season, we all knew were going to be sellers, or at least active on the trade market, whether you think they're going to be sellers or buyers, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers, right? It's really interesting, even with improved play from Russell Westbrook coming off the bench. We know that the Lakers are trying to look to do some things. They have been hesitant to move their first-round picks unless they get another star back. But the Lakers, considering where they sit right now on the season, considering that their season has been disappointing for them and the fans of Los Angeles, they right now are 11-16 on the season. But I would say this, right? The biggest thing that they could do is decide to move LeBron James. But we know that's probably not going to happen. But is this team content sitting where they are right now, considering they don't have their own first-round pick and things, or are they going to try to go all in on it and really improve this team, get some more talent around LeBron James, move that Russell Westbrook contract, move some of the other contracts that they have on this team, and build around LeBron and AD going forward? Could definitely be a possibility. I don't know if I have a surefire kind of way that I think it's going to go right now, but they definitely are on that list of teams that could decide to blow it all up. Now, again, another team that I want to mention is the Rockets, and that's because it's come out here in the last couple of days that they are exploring an Eric Gordon trade. With at least 6 different teams is the rumor on exploring moving Eric Gordon, who right now has a $19.6 million contract, and he's non-guaranteed for 2023-24. And what that means in moving the deal is that even if a team does have to move, whatever they move for him, if they bring in Eric Gordon, he doesn't quite work out for him, they can cut him without much hit to their cap space and risk for that team going forward. So I definitely think they're going to be buyers. The Pistons as well are another team, only because of the recent rumors that they are talking to New Orleans Noel trade with the Blazers, Heat, Kings, and Mavs all interested in it. Definitely could be one. Outside teams that I think that aren't necessarily I'm going to break down heavily, but I do think could look to make some considerable moves by the trade deadline as well. The Toronto Raptors, there's been some talk there considering that team and the spacing issues that they have at times, that they could look one of the pieces of either OG, which I doubt considering his youth, but Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, one of those players could be moved to kind of just bring in a different talent, kind of bring some more space into the floor. Now, I do say the defense between those players, having them on the court, has been huge for that team. But considering the rumors, and this is what we're here to talk about, they could be a team that looks to sell a considerable piece that could open some interest from some pretty big teams, especially teams that are around the middle of the pack, like the Toronto Raptors are, that may try to up their status in the NBA. I think the Washington Wizards also are a risk to do that. Looking at them, they're kind of in the same place the Chicago Bulls are, 11-17 on the season, well under 500. They gave the Supermax to Bradley Beal. They can look to do some things. The Portland Trail Blazers, this is another team. They don't outwardly own their own first-round pick. Their first-round pick this year could go to the Chicago Bulls. If they do make the playoffs, it's really straightforward protections on the Portland Trail Blazers. If they make the playoffs, the pick goes to the Bulls. If they miss the playoffs, they get to keep their pick. So you could look at the Portland Trail Blazers right now, the 5th overall team in the Western Conference. They are 3 games above 500. But could they look to make a trade maybe to improve that status, right? To improve their stock in a possible playoff run, considering what they have in contracts down there. So the Portland Trail Blazers are a possible one. With that being said, I've already mentioned other teams, and that's kind of it. I do think as well, look for the Golden State Warriors, right? To be a surprising team that's buyers at the trade deadline, not necessarily make a big move, but you look, they definitely are missing the defensive wing impact of a Gary Payton II. So they could look to do that. There's been some rumors about Alex Caruso, who's on my team, the Chicago Bulls. So be on the lookout for that. But either way, 57 days until the NBA trade deadline. There are a lot of different ways that teams could go. If you think I missed a team, please leave it down below on any teams that you think could be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline. And what do you want to see your team do? But otherwise, make sure you follow me at CEO Haize, at CEO Haize. You can also send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And that is it for me for today. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.